again to Bright Spots. This is Dr. Fred Smith with Houston Graduate School of Theology, and our two guests that we've been having this long-running conversation with. And we want to continue with that conversation now. We ended last time began to talk about systemic, talk about long range, and what I want to talk about also is scalability. We talked about prototyping, models, and then being able to be portable, but to bring all these good ideas, academic or otherwise, how to begin to impact the nation and impact the people, So, I mean, I don't expect you to answer that question right now.
We can't. History is a resource for us.
Okay.
The Leon Sullivan model was brilliant. I was
I
was his first Southern Regional Director, organized 13 OICs, 8 Southern states. When Sullivan had been he started off, as you know, in Philadelphia as a selective patronage program. They try to make it boycott, but it was selective patronage, by which they were able to use the collective consumer capacity of their members to bring corporations to their knees. And once they then got on a ladder towards escalator upward for the workers and all that, he had created so much employment opportunity that he realized he had to train people then. At that point, he brought his model to Martin. That was the beginning of Red Basket at SCLC. That was Sullivan's program. Sullivan said that what you need to do is to put your own dime on the table first. You bring together all of these different groups in the community who want to be a part of what you're going to do. Put your own dime on the table and create a result. You will not solve an awful lot, but if you create that result, someone who has a private dollar wants to be a part of what you do. He said you take that private dollar, and with your dime and the private dollar, you create the capacity to commandeer the public dollar that is allocated in the political divisions at all levels. Now you got $2.10. Your 10 cents controls the formula. And he used that model, as you know, to create, I think, the beginning of a serious new level of economic activity across America. And he replicated them in the city after city. And then, of course, he took his model to Africa, where it's more alive now. His OIC movement is more alive across Africa now than it is in America.
Well,
manpower training, community economic development. Many people who came out of that network found the entryway to the corporate world. And so there was a flow of these talents and resources. And I think we understood how do you partner with people who have an interest that parallels yours to get these things done. Leon Sullivan. So I don't talk about Martin without talking about Sullivan and Malcolm. I think you got to understand Martin, Sullivan, and Malcolm in order to overcome. And of course, for all of them, it was Booker T. Washington and others. But
and all of those have passed away out of our life right now.
But the legacy. No.
Okay.
It's they have not left us. Their legacy. It's a living legacy that addresses things that are ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we activate that living legacy, or is it being activated?
Well, I think that there are, we can take a helicopter view approach of this, or we can take a ground level view. And so let's look at a ground level view. All over America, in various cities, there are churches, might not be but one or two, but there are churches that have made a decision that they're going to invest themselves in a particular aspect of something that's going on in the community. It might be a daycare center. It might be to do housing development. It might be to address a food desert issue by creating a community garden. We've got pockets of that going on everywhere. Now, those are not necessarily models, because the participants don't see them as models. They just saw it as a need, and but they do serve as examples for us of what can happen when a church takes its DNA. There had to be a passion for whatever that was within that congregation in order for that to have sustainability. And so the church takes that DNA and moves it. That is the framework that has to be placed out there. It might mean that we need to change the way we do theological education
Yeah, there you go.
in
Okay.
order to make that happen. To begin to get, because if we need to begin to look at things from a systems approach. What are the patterns? Not just what event is taking place here, but what's happening down here? What are the patterns that are emerging? What are the beliefs and mores behind that the people have behind what this event is up here? And when we began to take a systems approach to looking at what's going on, and then we take seriously, if we took this as seriously as we take worship, if we took this as seriously as we take preaching, then and believe me, I am a worshiper. I love worshiping, and the other thing that I love to do is to preach. And so
Now, you're
I'm
a
not
good one, too.
I'm not denigrating either of those. But if we took the ministry portion as seriously as we took the worship and the preaching, then we could transform our communities, because the goal ought not be to build churches. The goal ought to be to build communities.
One of the things that we also, you have to do the best you can in the drawing room with plans, but you have to understand that the plan only gets you to the first step to start, and you got to be flexible with your plan to know when I get on first base, second base may not be where I have it on paper. I've got to be smart enough about where, as you say, the helicopter view helps me to understand where I'm trying to go, but it may not be a straight line. So it's almost the spirit of it that is engaged with the plan that you've laid. You got to have a master plan, and which, interestingly enough, on the 400th anniversary of our being in this country, we are coming up to the possibility of a third Reconstruction. And I believe that one word we haven't used here is jubilee. It's a paradigm that helps you to structure seasons and times and milestones and goals. The Sabbath is just a baby jubilee. 7 days, 7 days. Seventh day, I look back and say, what did I say last time we gathered? And I see this in the family, that when you think about the sense of despair and hopelessness in our communities, there is no way at present, and I think we're talking about something also like a 12-step model, where you have people begin to have a measurement of how they can go from one step to the next step. It ends up in a servant community, not just servant leaders, but a community is a community of servants who are leaders. And that's where this can go. You don't jump there. You go there in increments. You use what you have available to you right now and plan your steps based on what's available right now. In other words, today is what's important. But I'm going to learn from what we were trying to do yesterday, didn't get it done. Why did we not get it done? What do we learn from that? That brings us back to today, but it's something out here that's calling us to be engaged. That's where faith is a substance. What we do about where we're trying to go is a substance of things hoped for, right? But the evidence is the hope that we find when we make the first step. Yeah. And I love the way that scripture ends when it says, I'm talking about the elders and the ancestors who labored well in their time. Listen, it's been the 50 years since Martin was gone that we have gone from 600,000 people in prison to almost 3 million, and we've lost every resource, every institutional resource we had then. So wouldn't it make sense for us to analyze how did they do it? When they came out of slavery with nothing but the rags on their back, right? Nothing but that, and created over 100 black colleges and universities, the institutional infrastructure of our survival. That's where our lesson is. That's where the first lesson is. But when we learn the critical learnings there, how do we then Mobilize that. That's what we're talking about. You got to get out there and start doing it.
Well, I'm assuming the national organizations that both of you work for are really carrying on that
Yes,
agenda?
the Progressive National Baptist Convention gave us the opportunity. It's been 10 years at least
Yes.
since we developed that, the manual of how congregations can welcome returning citizens. We developed a manual. It's being used now by many, many denominations.
Right.
Trulia and Dean, the mayor, have now used that program. But we did a national launch of that at St. John's, and now the prison minister they have there started by a young man who was most improbably loved the story about Dr. Chisholm, and the chap who runs it now came in from the streets, and now he's doing a great job of that program, and they are part of our conversation here this week.
So tell me about Soulscape and the other
Soulscape.
organizations that you.
Right. I came to the conclusion, I've been in this fight, I'm 87 years old. I started in this fight when I was 17. I was brought into it by my daddy and the men of my community. I won't go into that, but it was critical. And I decided that everything that I think can help us resolve these critical issues, if we could turn people on to the fact that God has provided every resource to save every child, rich, poor, black, white, whatever. And that my role now is to promote the idea that it's possible. I believe that when we promote the idea that it's possible, first people who hear you seriously are those young people themselves who have understood every educational reform effort that we've had. They understand that we're not trying to really fix that situation. We're just trying to play with the system and make the annoyances go away. But so that when they hear that every child must be saved, right? When they hear that, they say, "Oh, they're talking about me now." So they begin to pay attention. They say, "Well, if they're really interested in me, let me see what they're saying. How can I use what they're saying?" We have people right now who are part of our work right now who have come through that process. They got the notion that they were not a throwaway person.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. You know, one of the things we talked about at the meeting was the millennials.
Yes.
I know a couple of times, especially over at the church
Yes.
this morning, he had the young pastor there, you
Yes.
know, who preached so well.
Yes.
So, and that's the issue that I'm really interested in, because I've read Leon Sullivan's book. You know, I read everything by Martin Luther King. I really began reading Malcolm X. You know, James Baldwin, Richard Wright, all those folks. All those folks are great. And you know, I was in Oakland, California, so I wasn't in the midst of the civil rights movement. I grew up with the Black Panthers. You know,
yeah.
and
You knew
Soledad Brothers and all that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that's all well and good. You know, but this generation,
This generation.
where we are right now, how do they learn from that legacy? How do they begin to address, because things are much worse, are worse off now than they were when King
Absolutely.
and others were doing what they were doing.
Well, you know,
So,
they
right now-
talk about keeping it 100. They talk about being woke. Dr. Wood and I were talking this morning about the passage in Acts where the nation, people from various nations were gathered. The Holy Spirit fell on those persons there. Everyone spoke in their own native tongue, but everyone heard and understood. So what creates, you know, what happens to create that? Well, on a practical level, we have to be able to use the expertise of our experience and the language of the millennials to help them to make the connection. So Dr. Wood had mentioned earlier that we take 3 or 4 models of things that we're working with and bring them all to bear in one place. Well, one of the partners that we have been working with, the founder of that organization was a young white man who grew up on the streets of Baltimore. Both of his parents were mentally ill, and so he spent his time on the streets, learned how to do the hustle and all that kind of thing. He was best friends with a black kid in school, and so because his parents were really not capable of taking care of him, Sometimes he'd eat, sometimes he wouldn't eat. But when he hooked up with his friend, he at least got to eat at Mama Jackson's house. Well, Mama Jackson found out that he was out there slinging,
Remember
selling.
the gang?
Yeah,
You were in
part
the
of the gang and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
She told her son he couldn't have anything to do with him. Her son explained his situation. So Mama Jackson said to him, look, you stay in school, bring me your grades and everything. As long as you stay in school, stay out of trouble, you can eat at my house anytime you want to. And she became his secondary mother. He tells the story, he was learning disabled. He had all kinds of issues against him, and he created this resiliency program based on his own experiences. He's been using this resiliency program. I think they're in something like 32,000 schools, and initially met Dr. Wood, fell in love with Dr. Wood. Dr. Wood introduced him to me, and now we've forged this partnership where we're taking his program into places that he wouldn't be able to get the program into ordinarily. I'm having conversations right now with an organization whose goal is to, sometimes it seems like the education system is so intractable, and we're just not going to change the education system overnight. It's like a huge ship. You're out there on the ocean. It takes a lot to turn that ocean liner around.
Yeah.
And so what can we do? So this organization is saying, look, we want to take after-school programs. We want to introduce STEM education to these after-school programs. We've got an additional program that we want to add on to this. So now we've got resiliency training. We've got the work that we already do with Soul Scope, and work that I do with the HADA process, Heroes and Dreams Academy, the work that this STEM organization do. We can bring these partners together in one location. All of this is stuff that is on the millennials' mind. And so we can provide these kind of opportunities so that we're not bringing them to the table, so to speak, as someone that has to listen to the wisdom of the elders. We're bringing them there as co-creators of this process.
Absolutely.
That's tremendous.
There's one point on that I've discovered, Brother Fred. I may be wrong on this, but I've discovered that what's at the heart of much of this, I think, is that when the millennials, Harry Belafonte said it first, and he said it well, I thought. Harry Belafonte said the problem that we encounter now with our children not being willing to be engaged is that we had the struggle and learned from it and grew from it and created opportunities for them so that they didn't, so we gave them the fruit of the struggle, not the struggle itself.
Yeah.
And so what results with that is a kind of a ingratitude. If you're grateful for people having helped you, you are just going to go try to be helpful somewhere else. If you're really grateful, I think it's fundamental at that. I really believe that we've taught our kids to be ingrates. Not to want to say, thank you, Grandpa, thank you, Grandma, even thank you, elders who I never knew. One of the people who affected my life the most was one of my grandfathers. I never knew him. He died the year I was born. And his legacy is one of the major resources that has allowed me to become who I am. He was born 15 years out of slavery. Died at age 55 from black lung death working the coal mines of West Virginia. And bought a farm, developed a farm that I grew up on, 40-acre farm.
And that to me, that's the missing gap. Because when you speak about legacy, you know, and Erickson talks about generativity. We've come to the age where we have to be concerned about the next generation, but there's been a disconnect, between Sullivan and King and Malcolm and
that's not the kids' fault. That's not their fault.
I'm not saying it's their fault.
No, I'm not debating, which I'm trying to make a point.
Yeah.
I'll make a point. And this point is this. I don't criticize the children for what they don't know. What I say is they don't know what I haven't taught them and what you haven't taught them. That's so right. There's no point in talking about what they don't know. How do we decide? We are engaging these young people. One of the things I've been doing here in Houston is something with neighborhood network of neighborhood centers called Baker Ripley. We've created we've created what we call the Jubilee Wisdom Exchange. And we bring the senior citizens, all that, bring these seniors together with the very young kids, high
Fantastic.
school kids and all,
Yeah.
teach them how to have a conversation, a platform of respect by which the young people can ask the old folks in such a way that the old folks want to tell them things that they've never told anybody else, how they've gotten over certain stuff. Man, they fall in love with each other.
That's powerful.
They fall
that
in
is
love
really,
with each
that,
other.
To me, that is really where it's at.
And that's what's
You know,
going to
it's
happen.
it's how you reconnect the generations, because
Yeah.
I go back to it. We don't have to wait for anybody to do anything for us.
Yeah, that's right.
We can do it
Amen.
ourselves.
That's right.
Amen.
You know,
Amen.
but we can't do it. You know, if we have been bifurcated, separated.
Oh, yeah.
You know, by class, by age,
That's right.
and I think one of the most critical ones by sex. You know, the male-female relationships, you know, is at the heart of the breakdown of many of our families and so forth, which is the breakdown between the families and the generation. So I know it's complicated. It's what they almost say, it's interlocking.
But guess what? The
Yeah.
cavalry ain't coming.
That's right.
See,
right,
we got to circle the wagons and make this work ourselves. I was very interested in Tyler Perry was on the Steve Harvey show and was being interviewed by Steve Harvey. You know, Tyler Perry's doing it. It
Yeah.
was his studio that created Black Panther and
Yeah.
all of that. And so Steve Harvey said to Tyler Perry, I hear that you're talking about buying a farm. He said, yeah, I'm really thinking about that. I want to get back to the basics. And he said, well, who's going to work the farm? He said, my son. My son has to understand that he has to work for what he needs to get.
Yeah.
You know, yes, I'm successful and
Yeah.
I'm doing well,
Yeah.
but my son's going to have to work to get to where I got to.
Yeah.
And see, and
That's-
that has to be
that's
that has
good.
to be reintroduced
Yes.
into our community.
Yes. That's exactly right.
When I was 7 years old, my dad I lived 2 minutes from the school, 2 minutes from the church, across the street from me, so out in the country. 6-room schoolhouse, one teacher, 6 grades, right? When I was 7 years old, my dad took me into the chicken house and said, when you come home from school, no, before you go to school, put the water in there for the chickens and put the feed in there for the chickens. And when you come home from school, after you have a little snack, and then go collect the eggs. You know. Now, for me, as I think back, that's one little thing that almost like I was trusted to be responsible for part of the family's sustenance. You know, and that feeds you so powerfully. As I think back on it now, I was a school bus driver when I was 16 years old, right? I never knew why the parents were so upset, because I was a great driver. Mr. Monroe before me had 2 accidents. But what I'm saying is, when people trust you to do something and make sure you know how to do it, it's a confidence builder. And I think we got to help the youngsters have some way they can contribute to the family's ongoing, sustaining of the family. And we can find ways that it's educational, and it's part of the family determination, spirit of the family.
You know, Dr. Wood, you just helped me. I've been over this a long time, but there was a time when I was a little angry with my father because when I was we had just integrated EC Glass. And we had not integrated EC Glass. This was the summer before. My father said, I'm going to send you to the tobacco fields of Connecticut because I want you to find out what hard work is like so that you will be incentivized to stay in school. Man, I was mad with my daddy that whole summer. Every time I looked up and saw one of those white tinted tobacco fields, it would make me mad. And for years after that, we didn't go up to Connecticut anymore. We'd be driving down to North Carolina. I'd see one of those fields, and I'd be mad. But my father engendered something in me. He made me understand that this is what can happen if you don't take seriously your education. Yeah.
I had the
That's
same
good.
kind of experience. You remember the movie Fruitvale?
Yeah.
You know, that's done in Oakland. Well, my father worked at Fruitvale, at the cannery there. And summer before I went off to school, he had me work there the summer, cleaning those machines and all that, crawling on top of that stuff. I couldn't wait to get to school. And he's been doing that all his life, you know, major part of his life. But I was like you, I grew up, I had a paper route and shoe shine business and collected taps and so forth.
I'm sorry.
You
Please,
know,
it's
so that's tremendous. And I really think that that's our future, you know, is ability to be able to pass on those lessons from generation to generation.
Yes.
You know, and how we do that, I think it's going to be a critical difference. And I think the place that I think is really important to do that is when I worked for SCLC too. When I was in Atlanta, I worked with Joseph Lowry, and I headed to stop the killing. Well, I was one of those that had to stop the killing campaign, the gun buybacks,
Eleanor.
and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
And there's a prison there, right there where they created the Olympics, right across the street there, off I-20.
Yeah.
There where they kept the young people, you know, who committed violent and crimes, and so we used to go in there, in the prisons there, you know, some of the guys, and it was amazing. They would tell the story about young men who would go to bed at night crying for their mothers, you know, when they shut the door.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You
That's
know,
right. Yeah,
and the mothers, the character would tell us about when they would hurt themselves, they would rub them down, and the folks were so excited that they would come back because they'd never been touched.
Right. Yes, that's right.
You know, but anything but sex or, you know, violence. But the thing that got me, you know, was a little guy about this big, you know, who worked for SLC, these big, huge guys would try to get out of line, and he would still say, "I could be your father," and kids would break down and say, "Are you my father?" Because they were missing their father.
Sure.
You know, so often. And so to me, you know, all these things that we're talking about is fantastic, but till we can begin to mend together family, you know, and I don't just mean the nuclear family, because the nuclear family have never really been our heritage.
Yes.
You know, it's always been a village, you
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
you know that
We-
raises a
it'll
child. So we
meet-
can reconnect the village,
That's right.
the elders,
That's right.
and the youth, but all those who've been taken away from our village. You know,
That's right. That's right.
not on slave ships, but in prisons.
And,
that they come back.
and we can't afford to allow ghosts to haunt us.
Yeah.
You know, we
Very
can't
good.
we
Very
can't
good.
try to operate from a standard that's imposed upon us. Our families are what our families are.
Exactly.
And we need to be clear about that. I remember when
And
Dr. Wo-
unfortunately, we're out of time. I would love to hear that story. Maybe we can talk about it offline.
right.
We want to
Okay.
thank you for being with us, and I appreciate both of you gentlemen being with us.
Good to be with you.
And having this conversation
Sure.
between the gathering of old men.
I don't think. That's a bad thing.